What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Coaching in the Shark Tank, where we dive deep into the minds of men and women responsible for inspiring athletes and shaping the game. I'm your host, Coach Eddie, and today we're breaking down Academy Soccer from the perspective and mindset of Coach Matt, who is the current Academy Director for the Jazza Hammerheads. Coach Matt, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
So for listeners who may not know who you are yet, can you give us a little bit of like your story, right? How you got into soccer and what led you to eventually becoming an academy director?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that for getting led into soccer, really my journey started when I grew up in Bristol in England, and just obviously the culture there is most people love playing football, and like that's where I got the love of playing, and yeah, going through playing from youth up until adult. I just wanted to continue to be involved in the game, so that's kind of like where my journey started, and then I came out to the States in my early to mid 20s, just seeing a lot of different opportunities to coach out here. So got involved with the college game for a little bit, just as an assistant, and then from there moved back into youth soccer, and that's really where my passion's been the last probably 12 to 13 years while I've been in the States. So yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about starting out, in your hometown and how big soccer is to the community. So you obviously had an environment around you that was conducive to playing the sport. How do you translate that into your academies?
Um, well, I think a big part of it is encouraging players to love playing outside of the organization of just training. Because I think, I don't know if it's a cultural thing or a generational thing, but it seems like a lot of players are so set in like, right, when it's organized sport, I'm doing it. But when it's not, like, I'm just going to chill out. Whereas like the best players are getting better because they love playing all the time. So I think that's a big part of what I try and implement into players is like having that, encourage them to get touched on the ball outside of training, whether it's playing with your mates, playing on your own, because that's what we did at school. We did it after school. It was like, we might train once or twice a week with our team, but we're playing 2 to 3 times a day because we're doing with our friends and things. So, yeah.
Yeah, and last week connecting with Coach Marco, one of your academy coaches, he was talking about his love for the sport and being able to reflect that into the kids that he's working with. For you then, what kind of habits and behaviors do you encourage in your players to help them fall in love with the sport?
Yeah, I think one is like enjoy watching the game when you're not playing it. So you see like so many players that are trying to, like, if they're trying to replicate moves and things that pro players are doing or players that they can aspire to. Love watching it outside of playing it. I think that's a big part. And then outside of that, just like being committed to always enjoy it, even in challenging moments. I think that's a big part of like for kids, if they don't understand that it can actually be part of the fun to work hard to have like challenges or setbacks in the game or even losses. Like you can find moments and wins within that as well. So I think that's what I'd encourage those young players to do.
Yeah, and then for your coaching staff, like how do you kind of help develop that spark within them as well, so that the players can see it modeled from their coach's point of view?
Yeah, I think ideally, a lot of that will already be in the coaches, and that's a big part of like when you're looking to recruit coaches coming in, that like they naturally have a love for it and a passion for it, because that's probably the biggest thing that you want, especially when they're because you can't really fake that. You can't really like force loving it or having passion for it. So coaches like you mentioned, like Marco, like he loves the game, he wants to talk about it, he's like, and then he instills that into the kids, and that rubs off on them, in that sense. So I think number one, if you can get coaches in that already have that helps. In terms of facilitating it and helping coaches, I think it's like, if coaches are planned, if we talk to one another, then that's good too. Like you plan well, then you're not stressing about the other things, because you've got at least like what you're going to be doing, and then talking to other coaches is going to kind of encourage you in the challenging moments. Also, like just you share good moments, bad moments with other coaches too. So.
And with that, I like to add that the academy, especially here, is a lot more of like a community. And I do notice that the coaches are more communicative with one another. So there's a lot more of that than maybe we see with like classic level where the teams are kind of off on their own. How do you then kind of help facilitate that culture that like all the coaches are working together rather than I have my team, I'm working with my team?
Yeah, I think there's within training days, sometimes will be coaches where they work together. So like a couple of teams might work together, or they'll be running a couple of different practices where they can flip flop. So then they have to kind of like make sure on the same page and work with each other there. Certainly when we have like a street soccer day where the whole age group is together, the coaches are then, they have that camaraderie of being together. And we try and do things like foot skills days where we have stations. So all the coaches can like have input on like, running the different stations and making sure they're, as you say, it's that more community feel, like working together rather than just being your own island, coaching your team.
Yeah. Okay. And I probably should have asked about this in the beginning, but like what really sets the difference between like signing my kid up for rec and signing my kid up for academy?
I think there's a few differences. The number one I would hope would be having like a curriculum, a purpose behind like what they're doing there. So like really having the intention to build in, like the technical foundations and having all coaches working on those. And part of that is like having paid coaches that are invested, that like, they're doing it as part of like, they love doing it, but like we're paying for them to be there. And like I think that's a big part. Outside of that, I think just training more, that sets it apart, and it sort of lets players know like, right, if you want to make this jump, it's not necessarily like if you've got an amazing ability, but you have the commitment to wanting to get better. So rather than just like playing once a week or training once a week, are you committed to like, training 2-3 times a week, playing a couple of times a week? That's again sets apart, I think, from the rec level.
And then as an academy, right, don't really have teams per se, but you have a pool system. And I know that we try to align kids with talent and ability, gender and age, and everything that we can to kind of set them up. Looking over that, though, you kind of have a wide scope of tons of children that you get to watch each season as they grow and develop. Has there been a moment with a player that really stands out where you get to see that passion click for them?
Oh gosh, like I think I've certainly seen it in a few players, and there's one boy that's from the U8s, and like I think you can really tell he loves it because he's coming out like an hour before practice, like hitting shots on goal, and that he wants to get better, and like, so I think like seeing moments like that, players doing that, getting the extra touches in before wanting to be here, certainly that. And then even players that are like, pushing on from academy, and like you may be like, right, are they ready for that going into classic? And they're not sure, but then they start to like, really they've been pushed that level and they start to rise to that occasion a little bit more. So I think there's a couple of players I've seen do that, which have been like, that's great, because they're probably unsure of themselves whether they could make that next step. So.
And within that environment, what's like something that you feel parents misunderstand about the academy as a whole? Like if you had to pick one thing.
I think a bit, and this probably goes to just youth soccer in general, like that being on a certain team for a season or for any time, or being with a certain coach is going to define your whole career as a soccer player.
Yeah.
Whether that means like how good you're going to be or whether you're going to enjoy it. And like, I think that sometimes becomes like a bit of like a wall for some people, because they see maybe some players playing on a certain team and like, right, I feel like my kid should be there, and if he's not, then he's not going to be getting what he needs. So I think that can often happen, and part of that is like, You know, when I was growing up, I wasn't always playing on the best team, but when I look back, I'm like, that wasn't always a bad thing, and like that really didn't impact it negatively if the coaches were putting me in the right spot. If I was like trusting that, you know. So that was I think that's a big part.
Yeah, and I've actually seen an interview recently where a coach was talking about that. You know, your weekend tournaments aren't career building; they're character building.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like what you're talking about. That like, it's not necessarily the most important thing about who your coach is or who your team is on, right? Because it's not going to make or break how far your journey goes in soccer, but it is important to understand like what impacts it's having on you. And like you said, right, even if you're not always on the best team, like, well, you can still gain something.
Right. Right.
So then what's something that you wish more coaches understood about player development?
I think certainly that players develop at different stages and in different rates. Sometimes that can be called like, I think coaches can forget that, and whether that means they write a player off or they see a player as being, you know, a level above what they really are, just based on like, you know, development stages and what opportunities they've already had. So I think that's can sometimes be overlooked by coaches.
Yeah. So if you have a new coach, right, first day on the job, brand new, and you're mentoring them, what's the first thing that you'd teach them then?
Have a plan, be on time. That's for sure. Like, I think that's like, that can be overlooked, and like, obviously there's various aspects you need, but like that has to be there, because if you're not going to be doing that, it's not setting a good tone for like what you want to achieve, and how much it means to you. So I think that would be a good thing to just, you know, and for some people it comes real natural because that's what they do in their everyday life, but for others maybe it doesn't. So it's just like reminding them like, hey, this is important part. If it's not in your skills, like make sure you make that happen, you know. So
and I love how you said if it's not in your skills, because that very much is a skill, right? If that's not something you're good at right now, that's definitely something you can work on and get better at.
Yeah.
So then what's the number one mistake that new coaches make, and how can they avoid it?
And this isn't really related, but I think the number one mistake, what I see a lot, especially with new coaches, is either talking too much or just worrying too much about how they appear, like, and not really focusing on like, right, how do I get the best out of these kids? So like, it's not about me, it's about them, right? And like sometimes just like I see some sessions like coaches talking so much, I'm like, I'd rather you just like let them play, like just like even if you're just scrimmaging right now, you're probably going to achieve more. But I think so that's a mistake, but that is also something that you need to help coaches realize, because sometimes you might not understand that you're doing that. So.
And you talked about having a plan. Do you think it's important then to like plan out your coaching points?
For sure. I think you know, it's a dynamic game, so there's going to be things that hopefully as you grow as a coach, you're going to see and work on. But for sure, like you want, like in your plan, what is your focus, what are your objectives, and what are the coaching points you either, you know, want to facilitate to get out. So you're making sure that players understand what is needed for that objective.
So back then, to young Matt starting out as a new coach, what do you kind of contribute to your success and continued involvement as a coach in soccer, and eventually, like we said, becoming an academy director?
I think obviously I've always loved playing and coaching, so it's like I think that's what's kept me going, especially when there's moments of doubt, whether you feel like you've not done a good job or you've had criticism and things. So that's part of it, and also it is about realizing everyone needs to improve, and there's areas for everyone to improve. So it's, you know, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. It's like, how are you going to be humble enough to try and learn from it and self-reflect on that as well and get better.
And for our veteran coaches, right, what should they kind of focus on in order to help them evolve with the modern game, and then, like you said, continue to grow?
Yeah, I think always be like bouncing ideas off each other is a huge one. Like It's not like you even have to agree with everything that everyone else says, but like I think it's so healthy to talk about like different ideas about that game, whether that's tactical, how you implement different things within a session. That would be a big one, I think. And being open to receive feedback still as a coach. Like, I think that's really important because if you do, as you say, you find yourself, a veteran coach and not open to hear from like a younger coach, just like maybe like saying, hey, like this would be a good idea, then you're only sort of selling yourself short because you're not like taking on new things, and everyone can like grow as a coach if they do that.
So with veteran coaches then, right, taking on new things, how do they prevent themselves from falling back into old habits?
Well, I think if they make an intentional effort to maybe it's watch other sessions of other coaches, like get around, you know, and if you're a part of a community of coaches where it's just naturally a part of the culture, then I think that makes it more easier to do. So I think that would be a good starting point.
Is that something that you encourage with your academy coaches then to?
I mean, I I honestly would say I've probably not like verbally said, "Hey, this is what you guys should be doing." Maybe I should. Maybe that'd be a helpful thing. That's good to reflect on my own. How do I help these coaches grow and develop outside of like the structure? Like, hey, these are some things you can do, like for a session. So I don't think I have, but I would hope that, like as you were saying before, like we kind of do things together. Whether coaches are assisting each other in sessions or running around stations, like I think that naturally allows for coaches to see different ideas, to bounce ideas off each other. Rather than having to like set aside time necessarily, it naturally comes into it. Hopefully.
Yeah, and I really find it interesting that you say you haven't explicitly stated it, but from what I've observed, it happens kind of continuous. I know Coach Marco, I mentioned earlier, I don't think I've ever seen him at a practice or at a festival, and he's not talked to at least two other coaches.
Oh yeah.
And sure. I know that the other two coaches may work with the same age groups, but it's kind of that same thing. Like I saw this season, you had Coach Alec working with a U10 girls group, and he talking to Jada, talking to Coach Brandon, right? Talking to Rico every now and then. So like the culture's there in that academy, and I do notice it. Even if, as you said, you haven't explicitly stated it, you've obviously done something that it's clicked for everybody. Mm-hmm. So then, if you had to explain your coaching style in one word, what would it be?
Oh gosh, that's a hard one. I mean, this probably gets thrown about like it's one word, but I like to feel like I'm an encourager. Mm-hmm. Like, so I'm not like I'm not particularly loud and vocal. I'm quite a quiet coach, but I kind of like to think that I try and encourage, however that looks, whether that's like, trying to push player a little bit harder that needs it, whether a player just needs a little bit of an arm around the shoulder, just like, hey, like you're doing good. So I'd say that, yeah. And I think that's a big part of why I want to coach, is because I want to encourage players, I want them to be as good as they can be and to enjoy it as well.
So then how do you then take that, right, your encouraging style, and build it into a player-centered environment?
Certainly number one, like giving players freedom to make mistakes. So like ensuring they know that it's okay. Not that we're intentionally doing it, but like it's almost like if you're not failing within a practice, are you really pushing yourself hard enough in those moments? And like, for a guy to like, I'm not sure if I can do a step over quite right, so I'm not going to try it. Like, I don't want that attitude from a player. I want them to be like, right, if I fall over here, it's okay. Coach is not going to like be mad at me. Like, and we're just training here and stuff. So I think that just making sure that they feel free to be creative, to challenge themselves and push themselves.
And I think that's always something that every coach, likes to say and believe, that like we want to make an environment where they're free to make mistakes. So how do we bridge the difference between saying it and actually creating that environment?
I think a certain part of it is like making sure it's in the culture where players are not getting on each other of those mistakes, and then also within your practices creating enough repetition to allow players to feel confident doing things that they can like try in a game, or and know that they at least have the foundational ability to do it.
Yeah. And then, right, so all of that goes into building the right environment, right, for young players. What do you consider then just the most important part about creating that player's foundation so that they do end up developing that lifelong passion?
Well, I think, and I think it goes back to like getting touches on the ball in training and outside of training. So you don't want to go to a training session and not be getting like, I don't know. I always say aim for 1,000 touches in training. Like that's not always going to happen for some players, but like if you have that like mindset to like try and instill that into players, I think that gives them a good foundation that like they're on the ball, they're doing things. And then part of that is also like if they're doing that in training, they're gonna be like, well, I can go and try this at home now. And I think that gives them the foundation to like have the freedom to be creative, to try it more, because they are confident in it.
And for young coaches then coming in, what do you recommend to help them kind of feel comfortable and get into the groove of like working with young athletes, being responsible for this development and interacting with other coaches?
I think not trying to overcomplicate a training session, and like within that, like what is your session objective and how am I going to achieve that? So if it's as simple as like, right, dribbling is my topic, like, or it's like speed dribbling, what is the technique for that? How am I going to make sure players do that, and how can I get them to repeat back to me so I can understand that, whether they show me or like, that sort of thing. So I think that's a good starting point, not overcomplicating, and then making sure you hit your session objective.
So we talked about almost all of the parts of the task of a soccer coach, right? From that U.S. Soccer has outlined, we talked about managing the player, managing the training sessions and the matches and all this stuff. So the last thing that we haven't really touched on is managing the performance environment, and that includes the parents.
Yeah.
So what is like your advice to parents who are first time coming into the academy and young coaches who are maybe and those young coaches, right, who are first time maybe dealing with parents?
Yeah, I think, and I'm sure it's like a textbook answer in a sense, is like look beyond the wins, like so, which is like easier said than done for parents on the game day where that's what they want their child to experience that win, and like that's okay, but it's just looking beyond that and seeing other wins within the game, and how a coach is going to need to develop the player, is going to need to look beyond that, because if they don't and they're just looking to win a game at that level, like they can do that by just getting the biggest skid, boot up forward and then put it in the goal. Like you're bypassing like every other player. So it's like, I think that's a big part, is getting parents to understand that, and see successes other ways than just like the end result of the game.
I mean, I can't argue with that, right? So then thinking back to like this past season, right? What is your favorite part each week about working with these kids?
I think a big part is just the excitement they have, like whether they're scoring a goal in training or just competing. I think that's like, I love that, and that sort of like innocence of it is awesome to see. I think that's a big part.
So I asked Brooks this question a few weeks back, and I asked Marco last week this question. So now I've got to keep it going. Yeah. If you could bring one famous player, past, present, to a Hammerheads practice, who are you going to bring, and what would they teach?
Oh gosh, I don't know. So many good players. that is a hard one. I don't know if I could give one player. I mean, I'm thinking because so many different players would maybe bring something different.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, well, I think back to players I watched growing up, and Man United was my team. So like the class of '92 of like Beckham, Giggs, and Scholesy, and Roy Keane, and things like that. So, yeah, I would say one of those players, just because like I looked up to them when I was playing, and I think part of that is the culture that Man United had during that era was like, you know, I'm sure they'd have some like great insight of how to build like, that into even younger players as well. So,
And touching on that with that Man U group that you mentioned, right? We had Beckham, who has in turn come over and taken a holding share of Inter Miami that has turned the club around and done well. But then we have other players, coming out of the same group like Wayne Rooney, who after his playing career went into coaching and didn't have the same success. Do you think that just the fact of being a professional athlete and having a passion for soccer in turn is going to make you a good coach?
definitely not that, because I think there's, you need to be able to um, like get messages across, and you could be really good at like, playing obviously, and like a Wayne Rooney, but like, are you good at like getting your point across? So I wouldn't say so. I think it can be a really helpful tool though, like for those players that do go on to become good coaches and managers. Obviously, they've received like a lot of good info from coaches and managers, and they've been at that level. And I think that speaks for a lot, but it's not a given for like making you that. I think there's other attributes as a coach and a leader you need. Yeah.
And I know with U.S. soccer, there are certain exemptions if you've played professionally. You kind of bypass certain requirements to get to licenses. Do you then, in your opinion, think that we shouldn't look at just did they play? All right, we get to exempt them, or do you think like, hey, even if you play professionally, you should still go through all of the levels and work your way through the licensing and understanding?
I think it seems fair that they would need to go through everything. I can see why, the argument for not, just because what do they need that? But I think there'd always be things that they could learn, even if you're going through grassroots stuff that would be helpful. Yeah, so I think my answer would be like, I think it'd probably be helpful for them and for everyone to maybe go through everything.
All right. What's one hill though you're willing to die on for U.S. soccer, right? In your opinion, something that you just like, nobody's going to change your mind.
And do you mean in terms of like what I would want to bring as a coach to something?
Sure.
I mean, I think we talked a lot about like I want to be an encourager. I think you have to enjoy it. Like that is a big part. It's like you can have all the experience in the world, but if you don't like allow a kid to enjoy playing, then that's gonna eventually burn out in other ways. So I think that's a big part, and I don't think there's many players. I mean, that get to the top level that would say they haven't enjoyed playing like that. That's how they've they a lot of what they do is like on their own, and that's got them through to where they're at.
Yeah. So then, how do you, in an ideal world, how do you balance the passion so that you don't end up with the burnout?
Yeah, I think it's always reminding players that there's going to be like challenging times, and you're going to hit losses within going through, but also looking to help them embrace difficult times and make that part of the joy. I think that helps, because if you're coming to a training session, you're like, oh, I have to run some sprints, or like I have to do something I don't enjoy, like in the sense of like within in the game, then you're probably going to burn out quicker. But if you like embrace those elements as part of like making you better, and like as a way of like enjoying those things, I think so. Yeah.
And does that look different for coaches? How do you prevent your academy coaches from burning out?
I think, as you say, community of coaches like working together. I think, especially where coaches have their own families, everything else going on, it's a intense to have to invest in that too. So if you can help each other out, I think that's important. But then, I think it's the same like in terms of the perspective of enjoying the challenging moments. Maybe you're playing against a team that is way better than you, but you're looking at how you can get successes out of the game. And yeah, because if you're just looking at like the end result of being your barometer of how good you've done, then like you might burn out a bit quicker because you're always going to be in those situations. But so I think there's a couple of things.
Okay. Um, and then summarize your entire career, right? Boiling it down, what's your favorite coaching moment so far?
Um, it would be so when I was back in Ohio, before I moved here, I had a team that I took probably from when they're about U10, all the way up into like U19, and we had won tournaments and leagues and things, but not like. But it was the final year that I was there. We won state cup, and I think and in the final, we were missing like 4 or 5 players. We pulled up like brothers of the team that were like a year or two younger into the team, and like I'm like, this is gonna be not good. Like this is not gonna go well. But like I mean, like that having that win, I think just seeing that the joy that these players like they put in so much work, and then it was like a really good way to like finish out, before, whether they're going off to college or whatever they're doing. It was just that was a nice moment, I think.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for your time today,
Yeah,
Matt. It's been great having you out here. To everyone listening, if you found this helpful, share it with another parent, player, or coach who wants to better understand the development journey. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And as always, thank you for supporting the podcast. We'll see you next time.